Hello everybody, and welcome back to the LJL officially unofficial coverage of the LJL 2021 Spring Split. Still your host here, Alex Weathers, Lexi, my Mars Swan on the air. Now, of course, in the center is Samuel Initialize Hapgood. Over on the other end is Alex Nymera Hapgood. Gentlemen, we have got definitely an interesting one when it comes to our power level dynamics moving forward. At the very bottom of the table of our predictions is AXIZ versus Rascal Jester. And after a first week performance from both these teams, what can we expect Initialize?
So, I suspect that these two teams will want to strongly argue against that bottom of the table label that they've been given themselves, because
That's
actually
fair.
both of these teams have been fighting with the best of them, and that should, I mean, especially after that last win, the Jesters look good, which is not something I think any of us were really comfortable saying before this. AXIZ as well looked pretty strong, and this Megamin character who's come out of Scouting Grounds, hint, Lexi, that soapbox is around there somewhere in your room, I suspect,
Somewhere.
looks really good. And I'm quite excited to see how these guys match up, because I suspect these guys will be fighting for those last couple of playoff spots, honestly, potentially, if they keep up this kind of pressure.
Think you're right about that one. Coming into this week, we had some interesting thoughts, and Nymera, AXIZ last week lost to Crest Gaming Act, but they beat the Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks. The Hawks have been an interesting team for us to try and figure out, and we will be bringing coverage of their games from the beginning of the day tomorrow. Where does AXIZ kind of beating the Hawks, where does that actually kind of put them now that we're coming against Rascal Jester?
That's a good question, because it feels like not every team had two great games. We kind of saw the best of a lot of these teams in one game, and then saw kind of the worst of them in the others. AXIZ, at least when they did pull out that win, a lot of their players who we have considered their litmus test players in terms of Hoglet particularly, and then also Honey to a lesser extent too, played really well. Hoglet ended up having some really good games last week, and that can only bode well for AXIZ, and something that we were talking about a bit on, I guess, on the podcast, and also just in the post games for them too, is okay, AXIZ now actually coming into these games and looking a lot more confident, and these key players looking a lot more confident. Is that because they're not surrounded by veterans and they're surrounded by rookies now? Is that giving them more of a voice? We of course don't know that, but it's nice to think about.
It is important to note that AXIZ only last week played on the red side, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with their pick and ban phase coming into this next game. There might be some differences. We did see, obviously,
Sure.
Megumin pick up that Zed, and Rascal Jester
Oh,
had also
yes.
only played on the red side as well. So definitely it's going to mean we're going to be seeing a bit of difference when it comes to the pick and ban phase. What is it, Initialize? I can see you want to let me know something.
No, I was just excited by the Zed. I was just like, I
Oh.
was reminded, I'd forgotten about it briefly. I was like, oh yeah, that was really fun. That was literally just an exclamation of my enjoyment. That's about it.
Absolutely. Well, actually, talking about that Zed, in the LJL, the two most played mid laners, or at least presence mid laners, was Lucian and Yone. Now, obviously, Lucian is a flex pick, but both these champions had a 63% presence rate in the LJL last week. Let's talk about that Zed a little bit, because Zed's pretty happy to go against that Yone from what we saw last week.
It's pretty good versus Lucian too, actually. I look at this as someone who's played. I've tried to make Zed work in many different seasons, in many different iterations of different teams that I've been in the university scene and stuff. And most of the time, Zed just works really well when you can make someone who only does damage really useless, right? Because if Lucian is kept behind, or Yone is kept behind, and like they have to be the damage carry, and they can't get access to waves because they eat one double shuriken trade, then like you stop them from doing their job effectively because they don't really have play patterns outside of that, and then also become like this assassination threat, not just onto the mid laner, but also the AD carry and also the junglers too in this current meta. There are like 3 out of the 5 roles that I dive onto and be like, okay, I can remove you as an important part of your team comp from this game.
Okay, so if we're saying Zed's definitely one of the more important things, do we expect some of these teams to start banning it, or are we expecting to see a lot of these other players start drafting things like Orianna and Twisted Fate, who don't get put behind because they're not all based around that damage. They do have other presences and other abilities outside of just damage fast face hunter kind of thing.
I think that against Mega Man
Yeah,
you ban it, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I think specifically, I think you ban it second phase. If you're wanting to pick particular champions, you know this guy's willing to.
Interesting.
Because Zed does not work into every comp, into every matchup. There are certain 2v2s in jungle mid where Zed just feels really sad. Or you get to the mid game, it's like, I am trying to team fight and there is so much CC and so many shields and I am just really sad. So like, sometimes you just get comped out of picking Zed, or you should get comped out of picking Zed. That said, second phase bans, definitely, I suspect there might be a Z ban or two coming the way this guy's way.
It will be interesting to see that. A quick little tidbit I had coming into this week. Akali was 100% banned by AXIZ last week, and Rascal Jester had an 100% ban of Camille. I know Rascal Jester banned that Camille again in their last game, so why do we think these two teams are indexing on these two champions, particularly in a ban rate? Let's go to Nymera first.
It's 11.1. Akali is strong. That's one thing. It just works well in mid and top. It does well into pretty much every matchup.
We're already skipped. Oh wait, this is a recap. Sorry, my apologies. My apologies.
Yeah, like it's just like Akali is just like has unparalleled ability to just like completely just kill the AD carry.
Akali has that ability, and why Camille for the Jesters initialize?
Oh, so Camille is an interesting one in the at the minute she is very, very, very good at both being a split pusher and a decent team fight come setup pick, and that's quite hard to come across because of course you can pick things like Jax into Camille, but Jax just doesn't team fight anywhere near as Camille. And you can also pick something like a Fiora and really index into split pushing. But again, you can't team fight, and Camille is one of those very few champions who can play weak side because she's got some hook shot and ability and still be useful. You can definitely get her ahead. Just a lot of versatility in the way you can play the champion that makes her quite strong. And for the Jesters, you could definitely see a duo of Camille plus Talia plus something else that really indexes to getting your junglers ahead as well.
Galio TF.
Is this something that we might need to be worried about for Inno in the top lane for AXIZ? Is this maybe, does Camille maybe exploit a large part of his champion pool? And are there other champions that could potentially be exploiting that same thing, Nymera?
I mean, I think Camille really doesn't have too many losing matchups right now, and combos so well with, again, stuff like the Galio and the Talia that Sam was mentioning, and the TF, which are all really good in mid lane too. It just feels like it doesn't actually matter what your champion pool is. If you go against a good Camille team, you even if you are the better laner, you can get put into losing situations. We've seen that across the world in various different regions. I think it's just best to just get rid of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the point, right? That for all that Camille can be put behind in a 1v1, when is it ever a 1v1 with a Camille? Because the chance are you've set up to use Hextech Ultimatum and Hookshot, because there will be a TF, or a Galio, or a Talia, or, I don't know, Olaf running at you, and you suddenly feel really sad.
Yeah, no, you will be incredibly sad, especially if a Camille gets fed early game and can just run you down like a relentless. Yeah, there's so much damage, and she can just pick off your yeah, exactly. She can just pick off your bot laner or mid laner if they're low HP, low high damage, low what am I meaning for here? Low durability? That's not a thing in League of Legends.
Well, I think I understand where you're going with that, though. I understand you, like, low HP totals type deal.
Yeah,
not a lot of defensive stats.
No armor, no defensive stuff. Yeah, they're just, they're a piece of paper. They're a plastic bag floating in the wind for a Camille to stamp on. Exactly.
You're stamped on by Camille. Those are some spiky feet.
I mean, that's something.
Okay, if you're gonna do this, I'm gonna update the stream title.
Camille skin.
Oh,
well, gentlemen,
boy. All right.
We're still waiting for this match to kick
there we go.
off. We haven't got it over to the casters on the official stream, so we will have to pad for a little bit more time, but I think we're perfectly good at doing that one. AXIZ and Rascal Jester have been two teams where we've had a huge amount of questions, and I think maybe we should fill in a little bit on why we had so many questions around. And let's start with AXIZ first, because as we've already mentioned, this is a 3 rookie squad, 2 veteran team, but the veterans, it's only really Hogler. Honey has only just completed his first split in the LJL. There's a lot of question marks, I think, fair to say, around AXIZ.
Yeah. I think that's right. And the thing is, what I probably wouldn't call Honey a veteran, probably what you'd call him at this point is like a journeyman, right? Like he has
Yeah, I think
completed
that's
his
fair.
rookie
It's a good
year,
term. I like
but he's
that.
not quite got to that point of being a real veteran. Like,
Not the
honestly,
cabin
Hoglet
boy
is
anymore.
Getting towards. Yeah, exactly. You're a ranking member of the team, even if you're not like one of the stalwarts of the league. Say, look at DFM. That is a team of veterans. Even Aria at this point is edging towards that level, having had 2 completed seasons under his belt into his third, right? Like, this roster of AXIZ, Inno, Megamin, straight out of Scanning Grounds, Nemo as well, I believe, in from a similar place. Honey had a season. That's it. And then Hoglet, a little bit longer on top of that. And that is it, which is makes this team a bit interesting because rookie teams can do what Mad Lions did and take the whole league by surprise because they have no fear.
Oh, and then
can
losing
do what the hell
players.
they like. Hell, the guy's been picking Zids. Right. But that is the other side of the coin, right? That there is a point where potentially the mental gets a little bit challenged, where some of the high pressure comes in, or some of these teams with a little bit more practice around late game scenarios, which a lot of these rookie shows won't have, can get punished. And I'm curious to see whether the other side of that coin, Jesters, could think about doing that.
This is definitely something the Jesters could have that, and there is that huge rookie thing. Let's go to the Jesters then for Nightmare. This is a team which has a fair amount more experience. So much experience, they actually got someone who had retired back into the scene, but they've got one young face in the top lane. What's your thoughts around the Rascal Jesters at the moment, especially after a first week?
So I think that, so if we're talking about experience and talking about all that kind of stuff, it is of course important to recognize that Kanato in the top lane has also come from a similar background, like a lot of AXIZ, new kids on the block. But you have people like Hachimetra, who's been around for absolute yonks. Sol and Secret were playing back in season 5 and 6, back in like the inaugural seasons of the LCK after it turned away from being the OGN champions. You've got Recap, who of course has been playing long term too. And the important thing for me is that when you have so many experienced individuals coming together, often you have a very set way to play the game because you have just played that way for a very long time. Seems like either all of these players have ended up meshing together and finding the right bits of their playstyle to work together, or at least come to a compromise between their own different styles to come out and actually be really confident around knowing where they can be on the map, knowing where they're in danger and about playing around picks and stuff like that. Of course, they lost to DFM, and we thought, okay, they made some bad decisions around that. The three other games that they've ended up playing, right? 2 other rather, because it's their third game, have actually been really good in terms of knowing how they can push up, knowing of like Secret being on his Rakan, just leading the charge face first, and knowing that if I get hit by the first CC, that's actually not an issue. I'm going to win this team fight anyway, and understanding their position within the game. So I think that experience has ended up working really well for both of these, for all these members, and because Kanatu is there now soaking in all of this experience, hopefully they're going to learn how to play around this team and end up being the role player they need him to be.
He can be the sponge for all of this knowledge that the members of Rascal Jester can give over to him. Experience advantage Rascal Jester, young pluckiness favor AXIZ. So we'll see which way we can go with these two teams. Gentlemen, it's prediction time. Who are you siding with and why? Initialize first.
I will give this one to the Jesters because I think that experience and their ability to play smart around objectives gives them an edge, at least early on into this season, where AXIZ has got a lot of raw talent, but we're going to need a little bit more time from them yet.
Okay, Nightmare?
Similar argument from me. Of course, I'm not a Burning Core stan, so I don't have to vote for them this time or anything like that. Unlucky, Sam. Unlucky.
I will hold on to that for now. I'm not letting that stock go.
No, gentlemen, you can do this in pick and ban phase. Take it away. You can argue later.
Okay, finishing off that point, I do think that Rascal Jester come into the first couple of weeks very coordinated, and that's very strange for a team that's come together so early. So I think that Rascal Jester will pip AXIZ to the post, like you were saying, Sam. Oh, Sam, have you died?
I'm still here. I'm just waiting to see whether Mass Swan is around, because I believe we're hitting pick and ban.
That we are, and we have,
I already introduced you guys.
Blue side, we do have AXIZ, and that's Inno, Hoglet, Megamin, Honey, and Nemo.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Of course, it'll be Jesters on the red side with Kanato, Hachimetra, Recap, Sol, and Secret. Turns out I might have just lost internet connection for half a second and didn't realize we'd been introduced. So it's all good. We're here. I'm back. Nothing has gone wrong.
So what you're saying is this is just an agenda from us to recognize your bootleg broadcasters. That's the one.
That's exactly it.
Lovely.
All right. Few bans here out from AXIZ. That is another Callista ban away from Sol. Really interesting to see. That's 2 games in a row we've seen that. The Gragas out as well. Interesting because, of course, Inno played that the last time and looked very good on it. Seraphine as well, rising up in that priority and off the table. The Jesters, though, are very much targeting that jungle pool, and that is 3 AP junglers, 3 really strong farming junglers off the table for AXIZ.
And I'm just wondering, why don't you just ban Renekton at that point? Because these are all like Renekton combos. And no, okay, of course, these junglers are just so strong in their own right. It doesn't really matter what they combo with. They bring value to a team. But Olaf, Graves, Kindred, all still available, all still very strong, all available here. I think that, of course, the Hoglet did have a pretty good Talia game, as far as I'm aware, in week 1. That was, because that wasn't one of the games that I ended up casting. I was like, oh wait, did I?
He won that one. It was very good.
Yes, of course. But first pick for Renekton, after having so many combos of it banned away, is strange to me. And it's also giving up Kai'Sa, and it's also giving up Olaf. Strange first pick from AXIZ. Got to see what they really want to put towards that top side, because now they're going to be facing 2 very premier picks, which dive into the backline inside of Rascal Jester. They've got 2 strong picks, which seem to fit the same composition.
I suppose what it does by picking the Renekton is it stops Renekton plus jungler coming in as like a horrible 2v2, and they can at least potentially set up for something to gank. And of course, you've got to remember last year, guys, Hoglet did play a bit of Karthus, and Elise is still up and is still a remaining top lane ganking AP jungler, because you do want that mixed damage profile. Seen a Renekton game already today, not that we've been casting, so maybe Hoglet goes towards that, but you can see...
Oh, that's a champion!
A few things.
Oh, not here too.
Am I
not
going to have a scream,
too.
flash, bear, slap, because Hoglet will be locking in the Udyr, and I am so excited. This will be my first game casting Udyr here in the LJL.
Not
The
here
thinking of
as
locking
well.
it in with the...
I thought we
I
were
thought
safe.
they were thinking about the Yubi.
I thought we were safe over on the land, over on these islands over in the Far East, and we're not. Udyr's here, it's here to stay, and Noah picks up the Alistair too, so we have 3 beefy champions from the side of AXIZ in the first 3 picks, but none of their carries yet to be picked up in this draft.
Absolutely. So that's some beefy front lines. You're saying a lot of ways to get in as well. Udyr, the reason he's so good is because Chem Tank at the minute means that Udyr is a very, very speedy boy. Before he was struggling to get to people because you could just kite him out or stun him. Now you've got to do it when he's going at a similar speed to Lewis Hamilton in a Mercedes F1 car. So pretty damn fast is the answer to that.
Yeah, Chem Tank is cheaper and it has better stats on it now as well. It's just, yeah.
It's just good. It's just good. Really the end of that discussion. The Jesters on the other side, though, it's pretty much what they were going for the last game as well. Orianna again, Kai'Sa instead of Xayah, but they've got themselves a good back-to-front team fight. They've got a lot of damage from 3 fairly strong options here, and got to see how they want to round out the rest of this roster.
But the problem is AXIZ have picked up 3 champions, which are of varying value in these first 3 picks, where you often want to pick up power picks and you don't have an AD carry. So you're losing the Samira, which is really what you wanted in this combo, and Xayah's probably the next best pick. So what are you going for in this bot lane? Are you going to have to go for something more like the Ashe? Misfortune might not be awful here, because Misfortune's good against champions that get zoned out by her ultimate and really don't have that same kind of range potential. Kai'Sa does have, of course, her ultimate to close the distance, to start trying to go for those assassinations, but you look at like the Orianna and you think, yeah, that's actually pretty dangerous to the MF too, and now you've got that Rel locked in. You've lost like the potential winning 2v2 on that bot side. This is a support counter matchup in a lot of ways, because you can end up denying a lot of shield, stealing resists, and being really good in that anti-tank matchup.
Of course, you absolutely can. We'll see how it works out. Yep, Rel definitely rising up in priority. I was casting a game of that yesterday over in the Benelux Open Tour, and just some of the things you can do with the champion, with particularly starting with the W and hanging around in those bushes to really jump out at people and surprise with the Ferromancy mount up, crash down, double ability from that W can be really, really scary. Of course, that is, as we said, the Tristana lock-in. They'll pair it up with an Azir. Fair amount of damage. Now, those are 2
I like that.
High scaling carries. Of course, Tristana, pretty low range to begin with, but draw a bead, gets increasingly long range with that passive. You can sort of see how this is working. Big, beefy front line, 2 hyper carries in the back end of it, and Jester's not far off that idea themselves.
So I would actually really like a volley bear here from Rascal Jester. They're going to go towards the Aatrox instead, because
Okay.
I look at I look at the top side of the map. I think, wait, isn't Volibear just really good against all of these auto-attacky kind of champions, and kind of does what Aatrox does anyway? But Aatrox is just such a comfort champion for a lot of these players. And I did say that, hey, I like this Azir. The Tristana's pretty cool too, because it fits the identity of what AXIZ's team want to do, which is dive in. Azir does that whilst also be scaling, and of course has the Emperor's Divide on the dive in front of things to set up for the rest of these melee champions, which do need to close that distance. The question is whether they can finish off that fight and not get mauled by the likes of the Kai'Sa and the Olaf, who get into the thick of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is, how practiced are AXIZ against Rel right now? She's still pretty new to the meta. People haven't had like years and years of experience against her. Like Alistair, people kind of know how he works to an extent. That doesn't stop him being good, don't get me wrong, but Rel's still a little bit of an unknown quantity. And like Cool JJ, for example, last night over in the LS lock-in was doing disgusting things on the champion. We've seen a lot of really aggressive engages you can do with that, and Secret has definitely been willing to pull the trigger over the last few games.
Oh, heck, I mean, even look at what Kaiser's been doing in EU, right? This champion seems to just do really well against the engaged supports of the current meta. You steal shields. There aren't like a massive amount to steal in this, unless you're going to go towards like shield bow, which you're probably not going to get on someone like the Tristana. But being able to take away tank stats from the likes of the Udyr and the Renekton, who are going to be relatively squishy diving into this kind of comp as well, if they're going to get focused down by Olaf, Orianna, and Kai'Sa. The Rel has enough damage on her team to be very effective at that peel engage style.
And I think it's also been interesting talking with a couple other analysts and coaches. So I was talking with a guy called Temporal, who Nymera also knows, who coaches for Hive, casts. And I was talking with him about what was going on with Rel. And he was saying, look, this is kind of what's going on. It took a little while for people to work out, how does Rel work? How do you actually get to use her? Because she doesn't necessarily play in the same way that a lot of other supports do. Because a lot of other champions that you don't want to face check or don't want to step up to, like Leona or Alistair with most other champions, Rel really wants to do that. She really would love to get in the face of a Leona, in the face of an Alistair, because she will win that in a way that normally those champions are used to winning it. You do that against an Enchanter support or someone with less tanky stats, and you feel kind of sad, but you kind of have to invert a few matchups you're normally used to as a support, and that took a little while for people to get used to.
I mean, so there is counterplay from the Alistair and from the Trist too, right? Because this is a really fun CVT. I do think that we're going to be spending a lot of time down here because of the low range of the AD carries and the engaged nature of the supports. You can headbutt the Rel out of the W, out of that dismount knock-up, and of course you can also try and stop the Trist jump with your knock-up too, right? There's plenty of ways you can play around this this Rel mount disengage playstyle, and just looking at what's happening, it looks like we're taking a little while to get onto the rift. So you're going to go see our lovely face again, because they actually set that up during the break. Isn't that wonderful?
It is.
And we are waiting to see that matchup, that matchup on the rift.
Yeah, I'm relatively happy. I think both teams are feeling pretty okay with their drafts. It's probably slightly more beef on the side of AXIZ on the blue side. Jester's little bit more sort of wombo combo, I guess, with Rel Orianna there for the ball delivery, magnet storm into shockwave devastation type deal.
That's a good point.
But you can see both of these guys definitely have ways to play these team fights out.
For sure. Hey, we got that little intro scroll, so we will be onto the rift sooner rather than later. But I think there's a lot to be worried about from both sides, right? Because it depends on... Because you can give one of these teams to any number of teams and they perform very, very differently. Because particularly for AXIZ, you need to be decisive. You have a short-range comp. You do have engage options with the likes of course, like your Azir, and then your supports going into with that Alistair. But you need to make sure that everyone's on the same page. And unlike what happened to Burning Core in the first game of the day for us, you can't just get a pick and then have 3 people wandering over to follow up later in a couple of seconds later, because that's just not going to cut it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And just like as a heads up as well, like for the official stream, this is their match of the week. And I think that is quite telling in some ways that, last week, would you even consider this to be a match of the week? No. But after last week, after the way both these teams have been playing, after the way these guys have surprised and are now looking not like walkovers, a lot of the other teams in the league are suddenly sweating a little bit. To Sengoku, rough week 1. Maybe not the best week 2 in some ways as well. Burning Core as well, not being as clean as they would have liked. Some of these guys are going, oh no, wait, what? These guys are actually
They're
good.
contenders,
And,
yeah.
Exactly, and that's not necessarily something we would have expected. And that means that this game could well be quite telling, especially when these results really matter towards the end of the split when you're looking for those last few playoff spots. It got tight last summer. It may well be tight again in spring.
We had a tiebreaker around the playoffs bracket, either for like the within playoffs, or of course in spring for the playoff spot itself. In both of those splits, it is often one game in it. It's often one game between someone making playoffs, or not. We saw that DFM make their run to finals off of getting themselves like a really preferential matchup in that first round. Comparative, I mean, they could have faced CGA from the first round. Heck, even then, Burning Core gave them a really good run of it in that summer playoffs. Singular wins and dropping stupid losses can be the tale of each of these team stories in the LJL.
How fickle the Twitter voters are. Last week, no one believed in the Jesters. This week, something like 68% would give it over to the Jesters. The AI bot, relatively even, but a slight edge over to AXIZ. And so wait and see how this goes. You can see these power spikes coming over. This is when they're expecting people to be strong at various points. That's a cool graph, actually. I'm assuming that's when they expect certain champions to be at their strongest, which is some cool stat work, Mr. Blitzcrank. Of course, we don't have access to what's going on behind the coding of Blitzcrank Sand, so we'll have to wait and see how that actually plays out. Either way, Hoglet steaming his way in for
really
early
fast
gank
clear.
in the bot side.
Oh, the stun!
Level 2 to level 4. Hoglet looking to come through here. He can't get close enough. No flash bear slap, no quick shot moment for me, and instead Hatchemet is going to run down over here and maybe try and get his way on to the likes of Hoglet.
No, but can we talk about how well Secret played that? Gank ends up stunning out the Alistair mid headbutt, so we can't get at the pulver.
Beautiful.
That's really well played. I was like, wait, that's a stun coming in, right? I'm pretty sure that was a stun coming through from Secret. That's not a missed combo. That's just a really good outplay from Secret. Of course, if I'm wrong on that, I won't be living that one down. But that was the chance for AXIZ to blow open this early game plan. You do have the really fast clear of this Udyr coming down, had outpaced Hatchemetra on the Olaf, but you'd also given up the wave push early on by the Trist, who does need that to keep getting farm. Farming under turret stress is really annoying. They end up losing that wave push, setting up for a gank. Gank doesn't work out. Nothing is lost from Rascal Jester, and AXIZ really come away with nothing.
They really do, and I think this is another thing. Like this bot lane for Rascal Jesters, Sol, Secret, have been around the League of Legends scenes for so long, and they've never really had a great amount of success, even if they've had moments where they've both been relatively highly regarded, even when their teams haven't been fantastic. They weren't picked up by LCK teams this year. There's a lot of rookies. Again, just to hell, look at the likes of, say, T1, who are playing the likes of Gumayusi, Elim, all that kind of deal. For Sol and Secret, they have really had a bit of a revitalization here. They've been playing aggressive. They've been playing commandingly. We might see a bit of a fight in the bot side anyway, as in goes the flash from Nemo, gets both down, but now they're turning it around, and suddenly Honey and Nemo in a very difficult point. But it's just health bars popped. Sol burns both summoners, so does Nemo. But that means that Honey here with the flash and heal probably in a safer space than Sol is, right?
I would absolutely agree with that, because the thing about Rel is that the thing which is unavoidable is when you mount up and you get that auto attack in. That one's pretty hard to work with. You can flash out something like the W disengage. So what I'm looking for is Secret, of course, to flash forward with that mount up and then try and get that flip onto Honey if you're going to go for those aggressive plays. Problem doing that, though, is that you do have to be very short range, and someone like Nemo can headbutt pull them out of it. Jungler's back towards the bot side. Hatchemetra is seen by Hoglet.
Yes, Undertow comes out, slows down Hoglet, but here comes the fight anyway, and that means that Hatchemet's gonna be a bit late, but look at the teleport! It's good timing, but Sol is desperately low. First blood over to Tristana, but now Kinatu is here. The teleport's coming through for AXIZ.
Jump in.
One back right now, and here comes so much damage. Renekton with the Dominus starts slicing, dicing, and culling the Meek, and Olaf will find his way to Valhalla, but I'm not sure it was a glorious death.
Slice, dice, served in the butchers, 2-1 for AXIZ in the early game, and who gets the kill participation. It's fortunately for AXIZ that Tristana, who's getting things off to a good start early. This Tristana is an LPL special, played a lot over there, and when you have this jump in, ballsy, aggressive diving in team, having that damage on Honey will be crucial. What happens here? I think the Pulve is not available from Nemo, or at least he's saving the combo, and he uses it to get just Sol completely out of this fight. It doesn't matter that you dive in between the Rel and the Kaiser at this point and the stun comes through. The CC doesn't last long enough. They don't have the Magnet Storm. Teleports come through too, and that's kind of all she wrote. The AD carry's already dead. The turret's not going to help you at that point.
And Kinatu teleported at level 5. Inno is there at level 6. And that makes a big difference because Renekton with Dominus suddenly turns up. And that's a little bit scary in the World Ender, which finally is available towards the end of the fight. But it's a little late by that point and definitely caused a bit of chaos. And that leads to an early lead for AXIZ. Possibly a few too many uses of the word lead there. But the point is definitely got across to you guys. And that means, as you can see, still a CS lead down there for Sol. And it's still a relatively even game. Only 400 gold that separates it. But it's tempestuous in the bot lane, and I would have it no other way, my friend.
Yeah, well, I don't know. If you were like a football team captain in this one northern town in the UK, you might end up leading leads into the lead. So there's plenty more ways that this does make sense, using that word far too many times for my English vocabulary.
Boo,
and
boo.
Rascal Jester will be taking the advantage, see, synonyms, in the Dragons, whereas Megaman gets flashed out on the combo.
That was a necessary flash, so well done by Recap, but also good for Megaman to blow that summoner out. Jesters, though, will get the uncontested Infernal Drake as a result. And that's kind of about all she wrote for now. Good summoner take away, but also a good Drake take, so much of a much, really.
Yes, 6 of one, half dozen the other. Relatively even across the board. Still relatively even in gold. It's only 8 minutes in. And we're just kind of waiting for the next thing to pop up. Hoglet does, of course, still have a lot of gank potential, but Olaf is 6 now. This is quite dangerous. Olaf can very much turn around these fights at this point in the game. Has a red buff, has Ragnarok. Of course, doesn't have the Gore Drinker right now, but AXIZ cannot be taking these fights with limited information.
And I genuinely thought Hachimechi was about to pop over the wall and cause some chaos.
I thought that was a dead Hoglet for a second. Like, oh yeah, Olaf at this point. Even though we do have, of course, the Udyr having a lead, has a couple of camps advantage and then also the level advantage onto Hachimechi. I still think that Olaf at this point in the game with Ragnarok ends up being just much more valuable in terms of the damage. We saw that last game with the Olaf versus the Elise. Udyr, of course, does a little bit more. In terms of the utility front throughout the continue fight, and also is just bluntly harder to kill. But that Olaf still brings up the damage numbers pretty well from the jungle role.
Never mind then, because I think we're going to get a fight around this Herald. AXIZ will back away for now, but they've got it down to about
Just
half
leashing
HP.
it out.
Megaman setting up Sand Soldiers, has got Empress Divide up yet. Inno down as well. Kinatu is around. They're going to try and fight this out. Olaf gets it. Big Q2. And now in comes Inno with the dominance. Trying to get as much damage down as possible. But the shockwave was huge. Recap gets Udyr. That is a good, important Void Seeker. Allows the killer instinct. And Kinatu will clean up the last. It is 3 for none plus Herald. And Jesters find their own fight.
Huge for Rascal Jesters. They steal Herald. The smite doesn't come through. Or at least it's a miss smite from Hoglet. I believe it's the first smite. Ends up in about 100 HP. Hachimechi smites it away after that point. Gonna get the replay through though, so I can actually see it with my own eyes instead of trying to remember it. So we do see that one of the really important things is that Sol and Secret, much like the rest of the games they've played in the LJL so far, have the first roam. They were like a good 500, 600 units ahead of where the Tristana and Alistar are going to be. Inno gets a really good dive in here, but you're funneling in. You're funneling in and the shockwave comes through. Importantly, there's no Empress Divide here. Imagine if the Empress Divide... Oh, actually, of course, this is still on cooldown from that mid lane play. Like, imagine if that was there, trying to cut off that choke point. Maybe you don't get ran down, but of course that is the case. Tristana, who does have a lot of that gold for the side of AXIZ right now, doesn't get into the fight. Recap turns that fight around on a T, and Rascal Jesters take themselves a significant early game lead.
And this guy we had written up as a washed-up veteran who'd been out of the league, clearly wasn't worth picking up, has been so good. And, of course, I'm a little facetious, but, that's kind of the commentary that was a fear, I guess, for Jesters. Like, okay, so we've got this scouting ground guy and this guy's not been playing for a year? What is this? And Recap has been so good. What a shockwave. What a lead. And he's got a Herald in inventory as well to really edge his way to an advantage, especially coming this Cloud Drake in about 2 minutes. Get yourself that mid lane priority and move your way down to fight for a second Drake as well.
Well, I look at the LJL and I look at what we're doing as a fan broadcast in this region, and we think, okay, why are we covering this? What do we want from the region? I want this to be high level. I want people to recognize the LJL, and that comes from the team stepping up across the board and giving good competition. We might see some competition and some contests around this bot lane. Secret Soul, they do sniff it out. Okay, put down the ward, see the three of them. But like looking at people like Recap, I don't know. Similar, we could say we were talking about Yuhi and thinking, well, Yuhi on Bone Core had a lot of issues in 2020. Why are they still playing in this league? Why are they getting picked up? Megamin will not be flashed away from this time in the mid lane.
In trouble. Good Shockwave trying to get him some space. It's still not enough. The problem of having Herald in inventory, my friends, you don't have wards.
No, you don't. But quick aside to, of course, the horrible carnage wreaked in the mid lane is that when we do have players like Recap coming in, who we have questions about, Yuhu, we have questions about. A couple of other players dotted around thinking, man, we miss having Blank in the jungle, who of course went up to KT. We miss having Pyrion in the mid lane. A couple of players moving out, Archer, Boogie. Lots of players this year we thought had upped the level of this LJL, had to be replaced by someone. And I'm glad that Recap has come in and shaken up our expectations and said, hey, yeah, I'm good enough. I'm absolutely good enough for this. Pay attention.
Absolutely. We are now in a game pause. What would it be a week of LJL action without one? It has come just after Recap died in the mid lane, so I wonder whether it's an issue.
I have this prepared. I have text on screen, Sam. It's incredible.
Well done. You set up. We'll have to see how it all goes out. And okay, so like a little bit of note from production. I believe that the one time Megaman has played this year in the past, went 1-3-1 and wasn't spectacular. Of course, there's not a lot of data to go on because he's a rookie, and the only thing we've seen is stuff from scouting grounds. So it wasn't the best game ever the first time out, and looking for something a bit more. At least for now, it's been 2 good gank setups with the Empress Divide. One burned a very clutch flash, of course, from Recap, and the other one gets the kill. So good stuff there.
There was. I mean, of course, there was the fight around Herald, which was less good, because you're committing to that fight without the Empress Divide, which is really important when you have these low-range top laners and junglers, right? The thing about Olaf is that you can't walk, even though you have the Ragnarok, you can't walk through terrain. Even if it is player, Anivia is really good versus Olaf, the Empress Divide, similar kind of story, right? So not having that tool to fight around was problematic, and Recap really came out on top in battle of these zone control mages in that Herald fight, and you can tell how important they are in these kind of games.
Little note from production here as well. Both the casters apparently a little bit confused about what's going on. Apparently,
I'm confused.
There was some audio of flash going on. So perhaps somebody has kind of flashed when they weren't supposed to, or there was some flash bug going on. We'll wait and see what's going on. If that is the case, that might mean something like a chrono break, which would be a bit frustrating. So wait and see what's going on.
Oh, not this again. So last week, for those of you who didn't join us,
we had the podcast for a while.
We absolutely did. Just updating some text on the screen, just so I can have a little bit more information for the lovely viewers out there.
Oh,
but
nice.
hopefully it's not going to be 35 minutes this time.
So I'm of course I'm calling Mass One Production Hicks. Of course he's at the back of this game doing some background work, giving us some stats and the rest of him. So credit to Mass One. We love him dearly, but of course it's at the same time he's not the only producer, because big up Nymera for also running the stream today, doing a lot of work with that. And that almost means he has to leave me alone to spout random sentences and hope they work out, because he's busy doing other things.
Yes. What were we talking about? Sorry, yes, no, of course I'm paying
attention. There wasn't a lot, man. It wasn't that important.
Gosh, but yeah, so I guess we got some time to podcast a little bit now, I think. So obviously it's been an experience doing, because this is actually coming up to the end, because we started our casting careers last year doing the LJL spring split. How's this spring split differed from the last one in the first couple of weeks? I know that obviously like we had a whole lot of different experiences within that spring split, but what's really been different about this spring split from the last one for you?
I think possibly that there is less demarcation between the good teams and the not so good teams. Actually, we have got a fair grouping of everybody who's at least seems mildly competitive, and I think it's not going to be a chrono break, and we are going to be back into game, so we can see exactly how that's working out with two teams we expected might not be so good. Actually looking pretty decent. Gold lead of about 1,500 gold, 5 seconds to a Cloud Drake, and Recap has a Herald in inventory, which I suspect he might drop soon.
Absolutely. Might be looking for that counterweight where you put it in another lane. Well, Dragon's been started. We have 4 out of the 5 members from both teams, just the top laners on the top side of the map. And of course, they have teleports going around this dragon fight. Speaking of the Herald, which I nearly misspoke about, summoned in the mid lane, and we're looking for the engage and secret. All eyes on the rel.
Right, look out for that Magnet Storm headbutt the Herald away, but it means that AXIZ will stop any plates going over, but it still gives Jesters free reign to start up this Drake. It is going to go over that way. Secret on the flank here, looking to try and get onto somebody. Hatchemetcher as well, also in a good space. Hoglet getting jumped on. Secret on this flank, looking to maybe find a crash down Magnet Storm, but not quite yet. Herald is at least caught Jester's positioning, but here's the teleport. Kinatu has not teleported yet. Inno looking for the flank. He will be spotted off on this vision plant. Surely they've used it the wrong way. That means that for now, Inno not on vision. Kinatu still shoving in the dragon. Not gone down yet, but here comes Hoglet. They're going to try and get it. Hatchemetcher is going to have to burn his Ragnarok and try and get out, but he's getting so much damage at the flash away towards the tier 2. And that means that AXIZ lose position around the Drake and might not be able to fight this one out.
So, important thing which I also learned the other day, if you teleport to a pink ward, it is always seen in Fog of War. You do see that on the minimap. If you teleport on just on your regular site ward, though, as Inno did right there, it's not actually seen. That's why it took a while to see where this Renekton was coming from. They didn't use the vision plant, of course, and that means that Hatchemetcher gets the unfortunate end of the stick on that flanking play, gets chunked out, cannot be their contest for the dragon, and it is the first Cloud Drake over to AXIZ, and we are left with, of course, what kind of rift have we got, Sam?
It's looking like, I suspect, we'll see in a second, mountain rift?
I believe it's the mountain rift,
yes. It is a mountain rift.
Like, hang on, what does this look like an ocean rift?
I was like, that's a found right came first mountain rift. I said in a moment of, like, mild consternation. What this does mean, though, is that Jester's got first turret solo onto Kinatu. It wasn't quite all plates, but it was still quite a lot of them, and it's a big CS lead for the Aatrox, who just didn't teleport. And of course, Renekton came down, but they didn't really get everything they wanted there. They didn't get the 4v5 team fight. They burned Hatchemetcher's flash. That's about it, and they did at least get a Drake, but it's one Drake apiece. It's not like they've got a huge stack going on, so some small edges for AXIZ in around that space, but a whole turret over the Jesters feels pretty good for them, honestly.
It has led to 2,500 gold lead for the side of Rascal Jesters. Having a lead on someone like the Aatrox is really important, because if Renekton or Aatrox are behind this game, a hard fight becomes impossible. And don't get me wrong, it's not this kind of thing where like they will solo carry the game, but of course if you do get on top of the Tristan or onto the Azir and stuff like that, very, very important. That's going to be the story of the game for Rascal Jester, and similarly for AXIZ on top of the Orianna and the Kai'Sa too. Nemo just looking at the enemy 2v2. Hoglet just around, not really going to be going towards. But if you have a lead on these big brawler dive-in top laners, it means they actually might be able to get through their full combo. And that can be the story of the fight, because we know how close they can get in these kind of games.
Blue buff spawned over here. Means that AXIZ might be looking to invade onto it. Udyr certainly around. And you can see Sol and Secret just being a little bit wary, because there's a fair number of AXIZ members who are hanging around that bot lane turret and a little bit afraid of a dive, but of course it's a bit risky diving a Kai'Sa and a Rel who've got a lot of mobility and a lot of CC to their name, so I think AXIZ probably wisely don't go for that super hard, especially with no easy teleport from the likes of Renekton to come in and back them up, so nothing much happens there apart from a bit more free time for Honey on that turret, and that's about it. Rascal Jesters with a significant gold lead at this point, edging towards that 2,500 as we said before. I suppose at this point we ought to check in on some items. Double Gore Drinker for Aatrox and Olaf. No surprise there. Kraken Slayer, the choice for Kai'Sa this game. No Gale Force. And on the other side, Kraken Slayer and that Hem Tank in for Udyr and Tristana.
So about that whole, can the top laner survive through their full combo before their shockwaves, Empress divided, and then just riddled with bullets or void missiles? Well, having a Kraken Slayer helps in that DPS check. So you could think, well, Gale Force, really good at target acquisition. You don't really need more access to the Angry Crocodile who is staring down at you from about 3 feet away. So how about you go hit them with some extra damage with every couple of autos? And Rascal Jester coming ahead with some really important items like you were saying.
Absolutely. Yeah, literally as we speak about it, it's alluding through for recap as well, and that there's still a minute and a half, so there's still room for, say, the Azir to get up and get that item himself. Similar sort of deal for Renekton, who's not miles away from his own Gore Drinker, but you really do want that around the second or this third Drake spawn. I suppose it'd be second Drake stack for either of these squads, but some of these upcoming fights, being down a Mythic can be a significant decrease in.
Exactly. I'm actually wondering if for this next fight, because it's only up in a minute, whether Kanatu is not going to have teleport, and importantly, Inno will, because of course Inno teleported at the start of that fight. Kanatu teleported back to lane to get that, to get some priority in the top side. Later on, Kanatu has the Herald summoning mid lane. If they can get themselves a mid lane out of turret, be really important. But you also got to remember that the thing's full HP, and they're probably not going to take down the full turret with this.
Probably won't, but they'll still get a fair chunk, which is no bad thing for now. It's probably used possibly a little earlier than they might have liked, because it doesn't get them the dragon priority.
I guess the problem was last time they tried to do that and they weren't there to shepherd the Herald into the turret, they didn't even get the charge off on that turret, and that's important, because if you had got that charge earlier, that's a dead mid lane out of turret. And when you have these control mages, when you're looking for flanks from your Olaf, Udyr, and your two top laners, and of course, pretty much most people in this game can look for flanks besides, well, I guess the Triss and the Orianna are less likely to do so. Having mid lane out of turret down means you can get into the jungle, get that vision. It makes that means to an end much easier. As you can see, speaking about vision, there's no vision in the enemy jungles from either team right now. Hoglet's the first person into the river, maybe going to clear out some and get a ward of their own. Inno does have teleport, and we saw that Magman used it to get mid lane priority, so we're looking for Inno once again, maybe to get that flank, but Rascal Jester, of course, were caught a little flat-footed by that last time. See if they can sniff out the wards now.
Yeah, they are going to sniff out the double control wards. Decent Void Secret Cross on Anema, which will spot him out over there as Sol goes down to try and save this bot tier 1, but it's going to be a little late. Honey takes a fair chunk from the Acathia and has to back out. That's a nice chunk, and it saves the tower as well, at least for now. It's on a hair's breadth away. Dragon being started, and Hoglet is around and might look for this smite fight. Look at Kanatu. Hop over and find Megamin. That's a bit scary. That means the Emperor's Divide is out early, and Olaf will secure the second Drake for the Jesters. A wise Emperor's Divide, but it means that AXIZ can't really team fight.
So it's not just going to be the Renekton staring down people from about 3 feet away. Make him more like 3 centimeters as Kanatu finds his way right on top of Megamin and forces out the ultimate. Dragon goes down. Shockwave catches both.
Shockwave comes through, and Megamin's in a lot of trouble. Flash in from Hatchemetcha, who's looking to run him down, and those axes do all the work you need. The undertow is strong, and down sinks the HMS Megamin. Dead in the water, indeed. Azir goes down, turret goes down as well, and Jester's come out very strong after that series of plays.
And one of the things that we talked about in week 1, particularly for CGA, was a couple of players getting caught out by shockwaves in places which they had no right getting caught out in, not judging their distances well. We saw that Megaman literally walked over the ball a couple of times and then just walks back into range when they're looking for that last couple of autos on the way from the Sand Soldiers and gets completely caught. Had Flash available, had the Slide and Glide available, if not the ultimate, gets caught by that. The damage is done, and Hatchemetcha, without having to run through that player-made terrain, runs down the Emperor Shurima, out of turret down, Dragon down for Rascal Jester, a couple of kills too. Last couple of minutes have been all on the people in purple.
They really have, and this is just some of the Jesters looking really kind of clean around some of these objectives. They've set up well in a few games in a row now, and they've got both Heralds, they've got 2 Drakes, they've kind of had a slightly awkward second Drake fight, but even then they didn't lose any members, and aside from that, they've managed to get themselves up to a healthy 3,000 gold lead, and things looking good from there.
Absolutely. So now the question is, of course, well, where are the leads? Why is that important? Why is that not important? Azir Big 0-2, that kind of sucks. You have your Mythic, that's great. You don't have an Ashes Tooth yet, and you're not building towards something like the Morello or, of course, the Void Staff, both of which will be important in this game with the double Gore Drinkers, meaning that the Renekton and the Aatrox and the Olaf, particularly for the side of Rascal Jester, can stick in their fight a little bit longer. So not having the items on that Azir, very important, because you're not really going to be relying on your top jungle and support to take down those carries, so you really need Triss and the Azir to be pulling that weight.
Hoglet just having a bit of a run in there with a bear stance, going to see whether he can catch up
run
Secret,
fast.
but she trots away on her horse leg suit dress.
It's a fashion choice, Sam. You wouldn't understand it. Fashion is very fickle.
I really wouldn't. Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one for sure.
Oh,
Sol
Triss.
needs to be in a bit of care, but does at least manage to supercharge with a flash. Bear! Slap! It happens! It's there! And along with the Tristana Buster shot, Kai'Sa goes down. Hoglet finds a beautiful pick in the mid lane, and now the tier 1 under siege. Undertow's come out to try and clear the wave, and that means that the tier 1 at least stays alive, but a great pick onto the Kai'Sa.
Really well done. I mean, that's Hogler and Honey knowing where they can play around, right? We talk about these two players being less than successful on their previous teams. Of course, Hogler playing on AXIZ in the last year and Honey playing on the Hawks. Now together, they seem to have found their rhythm and they're playing very well in this game.
All right, Hachimechi goes in, but taking a lot of damage. Has to Ragnarok away. Takes so many shots.
Shockwave
gets the shutdown. The Shockwave is massive. And Kinatu gets in on top. The Emperor's Divine afterwards, though, buys a lot of space. Secret now in trouble. And Recap and Kinatu are trying to run away. It is still a 2v4. But here comes Sol, who's respawned. Recap with the command dissonance, causing chaos. Flash for the Call the Meek. That's a Void Seeker coming in, but they need to be very careful. If Sol wants to pull that trigger, decides not to, it's a win for AXIZ, but the Baron is stopped.
When was the last time you saw a 4-man Shockwave not win a team fight? They didn't have the Kaiser. That all-empowering AD carry from Sol was not on the board, and AXIZ take that fight even though it got super, super close. I'm sure we'll see a replay of it. One go, and of course that's coming up right now. Where does this start? It starts with the pick onto the Sol, and that's with the blue trinket. It doesn't flash away, of course, doesn't have the cleanse. As soon as Hogler gets on top of them, that's pretty much lights out. And bringing the exhaust doesn't help when Triss is out of range of that. It's just the Udyr you can get that summoner spell onto, and that doesn't really help your endeavors at that point. AXIZ then start turning the screws and say, okay, you don't have your AD carry, we're going to start that Baron, force you to commit. And this choke point, once again, much like the Herald fight, becomes very important for Rascal Jester to play around. The flash Q3 from Kinatu, that is normally a game-ending play. That's IG 2018 levels of damage coming through, but you still don't have your AD carry to clean up. It does mean that Triss gets to jump forward time and time again, and Recap in this very important moment just takes one step too far forward, and misjudging those ranges is often the death of these carries, and Renekton snaps up the Clockwork Lady.
And with that fight, AXIZ are back to even. With that fight, we are back to live with a Dragon Void and a Teleport coming through. Jesters want revenge, and they're going to look to come in, but there's a lot of summoners up. That will be the second Drake going over the way towards AXIZ. They are now 2-2
Watch for
on
the
that
Shockwave.
score. But watch for that Shockwave indeed. Magnet Storm comes out, but Megamin has already got one. Inno in the backline causing chaos. Oriana gets one back. It's huge, but look at Kinatu in the front line. Look at Recap looking for the command attack. Won't find it for the stopwatch there. Megamin desperately low. They will get him. Sol running rampant, but Inno is there again, and Tristana causing chaos, and AXIZ find another team fight.
They absolutely do. We're just going to see what's happening to Kinatu. Important if he dies as well. Going to get the Q3, trying to regen.
It's not enough.
It is
Ace
not.
for Honey. Oh my days, that Tristana, man.
And it's an ace for Honey, and Honey has never felt so sweet in this game. Gets out with 406 at the end of that one. I remember one of the first things that we said back in spring was, Honey, we shrunk the health bars. Let's see how this one comes out. Of course, it is funneling in, and both these control mages love this kind of situation. Nemo has the ultimate. It's not rank 2, but does manage to get out. And then you're thinking, okay, right, the right people are tanking the damage from the side of AXIZ. Megamin, Honey, they're untouched right now, whereas Kinatu can't get on top of them. Shockwave very nearly turns things, but look at that. The Kaiser ult gets blocked by the cast of the Emperor's Divide, and of course it doesn't stop dashes after it's in place, but during the cast you can actually stop those. And that's very, very pivotal. It means that Sol can't get that execute damage, can't get onto the backline, gets killed instead. The resets come through. It's a very frantic but opportunistic fight for AXIZ.
And that is 2 clutch Emperor's Divide in a row, because the first one in that last team fight around the Baron knocked Kinatu away from the nearly dead members of AXIZ. And this one knocked Sol away from what would have been an execute onto Hogler, onto Megamin as well, actually. And it meant that Azir got to do more damage in that fight. Look at those damage numbers. Yeah. Sol, Kinatu, Inno, and Honey all putting up mad numbers. It just wasn't enough to finish up those fights.
But what you'll see, is that's a very even amount of damage across the board. Yeah. And then you see, okay, well, what happens if we add in a couple of Mountain Dragons the other side? Suddenly, where those health bars are, going down from the side of Rascal Jester, if they do secure that dragon, maybe they don't. It does get very close. And and it just goes to show the team fighting prowess of both these teams to see how close it gets in all of these different metrics. Rascal Jesters were ahead for a sizable amount in this game. They're only just behind now by that just 1,000 mark as the bot lane outer turret finally falls to Kinatu. And speaking of Kinatu, and Inno, and Megamin, and Recap coming back, these are new players back to the LJL in 2021, and I kind of wish I'd bought into that Megamin stock that Lexi has done on the production side of things, because my word, these rookies are showing up and they're really giving us a storm here.
They are, but of course, speaking of storms, there's still a secret. There's still a Magnet Storm available into a Shockwave, into Kinatu flashing in. There is a world where Magamin doesn't hit the Clutch Emperor's Divide. Suddenly things go a lot different. How many times can you accurately cancel Kai'Sa Killer Instinct with Emperor's Divide? I just don't know. So I still think these fights are going to be damn close. Even if AXIZ right now, definitely with a slight edge.
It is. And Inno versus Kinatu now in the bot lane. Not level 16 for Inno, but really taking it to this Aatrox right now.
Pop the World Ender to get some speedways. Here comes Honey looking to try and get in onto this Aatrox, who doesn't hop over the wall, so won't spot Honey coming down. But I think the rotation was spotted, which is why...
I think it was spotted on the Scuttle Vision, yes.
Alright, either way, now Rascal Jester's looking for a little bit of trade back themselves. Just poking away at Hoglet, who walks into the red side jungle of the Jesters and finds himself an axe and a ball? I mean, it is just called the ball for Orianna, but it's a very dangerous ball that has explosives.
Hoglet's going.
They're going in, though. That's a very fast Hoglet with a Chem Tank when it's onto Hachimecha, who doesn't use his Ragnarok critically. And it is all about this Baron, all about this Mountain Drake that will be spawning in 50 seconds.
It is, and we're looking at this with a lot of big guns to bear. Not just the Tristana there with 3.5 items. We've got that Azir with the 2-item mark. If you get towards a Blighting Jewel or the Morellonomicon component, the Oblivion Orb, to get either that Magic Pen or the Grievous Wounds could be such a key item for this next fight. It actually has picked up that Grievous Wounds on that Oblivion Orb. Now, Hoglet he's not in danger. He's just going to run away. I don't know why I got excited there.
Quite fast. Maybe if there'd been a little bit more to come through, you might have seen something. And I kind of thought Nemo had his back cancelled there, but it was in that last 0.5 seconds. So the axe coming through the cow didn't keep him there, which would have been a disaster for AXIZ. Instead, we have got ourselves another 5v5 setup around another Drake. This will be third Drake for either team, and they both really want it. Watch for the shockwaves. Watch for the slight lack of vision here for both teams, though AXIZ kind of got a little bit more in and around that river right now, and its mid lane priority that is the first port of call for both of these
And
squads.
again, we're looking at what Secret's going to do on this Rel. We know the huge engages which can come in from the Iron Maiden, and it's looking like 2 minutes to midnight, and Dragon has spawned.
Well, we'll have to see whether the deck is stacked. It'll be aces high for Secret or not, but Dragon now started, and we're going to have to wait and see how this one plays out. Hoglet over this side, pulling the Drake out. It'll reset slightly, but this means that Rascal Jesters do need to come in. They've got to find their way past it. No, it's down to half HP. Hachimecha not there, and they just give it up. They don't want the fight. AXIZ get it.
And you can tell how tentatively Rascal Jesters are now approaching these fights. They know that they don't necessarily win if the Azir and the Tristana are in the right positions. And every fight, this is getting worse. Because you see the Tristana is leveling up, getting more range on that passive. Azir is getting more items. We talked about that coming into that last one. Having the Grievous Wounds, very important for the Aatrox, trying to duel it out with them on the backline. Rascal Jesters now baiting the Baron, but it looks like actually AXIZ are not falling for it too much right now. They have a blue trinket. See, it's not been started, and they get to push down mid lane.
And all the while, this top wave is huge for AXIZ. It's just solo taking that top tier 2, and there's no one from AXIZ who's willing to go over and take that right now. Kinatu's not over there. They are going to start up this Baron, though, and it does go down pretty quickly. They've got an Orianna and, of course, a Kai'Sa, who does a lot of work to Baron, down to half HP. They are going to force AXIZ to come in and fight this. They are going to force them to come into the Shockwave, into Rel, which is always a bit scary. But the front line for AXIZ, the likes of Nemo and stuff, is scary. They lose top tier 2. They can't bait Baron. They're going to have to back away. Just as I'm really not sure about that
They're
call.
so afraid of this disengage potential from AXIZ. They're not getting the correct engage angles. When it becomes this very narrow front-to-back team fighting setup, it looks like Rascal Jesters just do not want to commit. They don't have the vision to get teleport wards. Secret is always going to be spotted out, and AXIZ, therefore, are very happy to sit there and watch Rascal Jester lose across the map.
Kinatu still had that teleport. He could have gone up there and come in if he needed to, but that top wave just being lost to tower, losing the tower with it, in fact, isn't the best look. And AXIZ still up at a slight, 2-ish thousand gold here, just shy of, is giving them an advantage. And this kind of tentativity is a bit scary. Of course, you are afraid of Empress Divide, of Buster Shot, of Alistair and the like shunting you out of the fight. But at the same time, that wasn't a clean series of macro plays either from Jest.
No, it wasn't, and remembering back to Rascal Jester's very first match, they played against Detonation Focus Me last week. this kind of happened then too. They were forced into, well, behind a mountain dragon in a hard place, and they found themselves really struggling to close out what they had as a lead over DFM and get themselves to a point where they could actually close out these team fights. We're looking at now the Baron still being alive, Dragon's not available, and Honey is getting a lot of side lane farm, getting to the point where they are at level 16. They have so much extra range. In fact, the Observer's highlighting that right now, because it's 645 range, all things said and done. Ooh. Doesn't have a rapid fire cannon, but that's like almost Caitlyn level of range permanently for the side for that Tristana now. And when you have 4 completed items, Phantom Dancer, really good item by the way. If you get to start auto attacking an objective and start stacking up that passive, we get to those 5 autos on patch 10.11. The extra attack speed you get, which is like an extra 40%, means that when you jump in, it's like jumping in with the old fully stacked Rage Blade.
Wow. Okay, we'll keep our eyes on that. Of course, right now game's still pretty even. Even those last few plays weren't especially good for the Jester. And we're kind of back to a little bit of a stalemate for now until the next dragon comes up. It would be Mountain Soul for AXIZ, who have claimed that 3rd Drake for themselves after that last series of plays, of course. And they have kind of, at least for now, are edging out something of an advantage here. And when you've got a Flash Bear Slap available, there's nothing you can't do.
Absolutely not. Also, fun fact, you know, we were talking about, the Phantom Dancer, and then onto the Tristana. Well, of course, you got your Q as well, which gives you a huge amount of attack speed for a couple of seconds. Honey maxes out on attack speed. You get to 2.5 attack speed per second. To 2.5 attacks per second. So if you end up getting onto a dragon or onto just killing a ward and then jumping in, if you turn onto a champion, you just melt them. Tristana is at the point where they can do pretty much anything in this point, and when you get those resets after the fact, it is going to go from bad to worse for Rascal Jester. This is why they don't want to stunt the engage. It's why they are trying to make sure they have the perfect opportunity, because if it's anything less than that, there is a lot of risk involved.
Honey did just get hit by the Void Seeker there, but Sol doesn't pull the trigger. You know, you can see the Observers just panning over, wondering whether the Jester might go for that, and they decide not to. Got about 25 seconds until this Mountain Drake spawns, and Jesters are going to roam over and look to claim command over this area. But of course, AXIZ could give this up. They could go for the Baron. But it does put Jesters between a rock and a Mountain Drake.
Yes.
And they've got to find their way out of a fairly difficult situation. Not at the wave, off vision, looking to haunt the flanks of the Jesters. He's already had one very good flank earlier that forced the flash out of Hatchemetcha. Was a bit unlucky to get a
That's right!
Magnet Field is huge! Megamin is dead! They finally find the pick, but now Tristana running rampant at the backside, trying to get as much damage down as she can. Big shield for Hatchemetcha, and Inno gets not pulled back with Inferno. It's a 1-for-1, but support for mid laner is a big difference in damage right now. Inno has bopped the Dominus and it's gone down. Now Honey used to be the main character. Recap is in trouble. Has got a flash, does get out. The Cathian Rain lands onto Hoglet, but Honey is running wild on the backside of this fight. Hoglet flashes in. Honey jumping in with the Buster Shot, and Rocket jumps. And that will be a double for the Tristana, who is out of control. And as you said it before, Honey, I shrunk the health bars. I shrunk your chance of winning, and it's Sol alone against 3. And I don't think the Kaiser wins, prestige or not, jumping in. The explosive charge is proccing. Merry Christmas, they say. As Sol jumps forward, tries to get something with the exhaust. It's not quite enough. And that will be a major, major victory for AXIZ. I have to call out, if Sol had that exhaust and managed to get it onto Honey a little earlier in the team fight, maybe it could have gone different.
Maybe it could have done, but driving in and navigating these team fights is such a treacherous affair. Secret finally finds an engage. It's not enough. They get Megamin, but the Tristan is out of control at this point. We're going to go have a look at, again, why are these teams grouping up? Why are they trying to posture so closely to each other? It's because they both know what's at stake for this dragon. They're looking for the perfect engage. What did you spot?
He sombreroed his shockwave
and
at the beginning of the fight.
You know, I actually had completely missed that. I was too busy looking at the Magnet Storm, but that's the kind of play which loses you the game. And then Recap, high on that adrenaline, thinks that Nemo's combo is going to come through and blinks first. There is no combo put through, gets caught out of position, and the Orianna really ends up getting nothing done during this team fight. Honey gets to jump forward again and again, and they get the ace, they get themselves the Mountain Soul, and as we come back to live, they get themselves the Baron.
That is a disaster for Recap. It's so unfortunate. He had a great game for such a while in this one, found some good shockwaves earlier. That 4-man one earlier was the thing of beauty, but you cannot in these late game clutch scenarios. Sombrero, you cannot then like blink first with the stopwatch.
Yeah,
it really cost them.
So I wonder what happened there. It's kind of one of the old problems with Rakan. I didn't quite see the positioning again. I missed it even on the replay. I was looking at different things. Obviously, there's a leash range on Orianna. There is leash range, and if you end up flashing forward, dashing forward, and going right into the thick of things, you can end up losing the ball when it's on top of you. It could have just been a miscommunication, or Recap not positioning far enough forward under, having that threat of being jumped on by the various members of AXIZ too. Either way, it pops back, the Sombrero comes through, and that could be the moment which costs Rascal Jesters their 3rd win in the LJL.
What it will do, at the very least, is put AXIZ up to Mountain Soul Point. They've got a Baron as well. They've broken the base and the inhibitor in the mid lane. They have got themselves a 5,000 gold lead to... Sorry, 6,000 gold lead to boot. So they are well and truly in command of this game. And when you have got a 5-item 807 level 18 Tristana to your name as well, things are looking pretty damn good for AXIZ.
Absolutely, and the extra shield coming through from the Bloodthirster, really helpful. This is going to be 100% critical strike on Trist, who's going to have 2.5 attack speed with a bucket load of AD. We saw that basically... It didn't matter that Megamin went down. And look, 1, 5, and 6 is not a pretty scoreline on Megamin, but often Megamin has been the carry to die over Honey, and that's because... And Honey sat there 8, 0, and 7 is probably because all of those cooldowns, which might have been used to kill the Tristana, instead went towards the mid lane instead. Still relatively happy with this Azir performance. Rascal Jester will need to take down both of them if they want to win this game.
It's a lot of explosive charge damage down onto Taz. The other thing you got to remember is that Tristana does one thing exceptionally well, and that is be a demolitionist. It's a 1-4 split. You know, in the top side, it is onto the inhibitor up there. AXIZ and the rest of the squad looking to get onto this inhibitor around the bot lane. 2 inhibitors now down for Rascal Jesters, and they need to find a fight now, or they're going to be down 3 inhibitors and never be able to leave their base again for the next 5 damn minutes.
So Hashmatch are looking for some kind of a flank, trying to clear out something. And ironically, when we talked about in draft, AXIZ needing to be decisive, they're going now.
Oh, well, that's just all the damage in the world. He is dead. Hatchemetcha is not long for the world indeed. And now Hoglet is steaming his way forwards, and there is a 4v5. 3 inhibitors down, and the Jesters have got one last gasp to find something, one last chance to find a team fight, or their game here is done. Honey is monstrous. Flash in for the Magnet Storm. The shockwave lands. Honey's still alive, though. He's alive, and the health bars are shrunk. Sol gets it back, but he's going to try and stay alive. They've got to fight under the last tower, but it's not enough. They get the shutdown. Megamin stays alive this time out, and Kinatu will fall. AXIZ get the game win after a massive turnaround from the early game deficit.
AXIZ proved to be the more decisive of these 2 teams. Honey takes his first death of the game at the Nexus, but you know what? I think he'll trade that for a dominant win over the Jesters.
Ah, man, I am still a little shell-shocked. What an amazing game. But to break it all down and get our heads around it all, we are going to have to take a quick break, and we'll be back in a moment after this short break.
Hello everybody. Welcome back to the desk. Mars 1, Initialize, and Chimera on the other end. Gentlemen, we just saw AXIZ topple Rascal Jester. Rascal Jester will have to be satisfied with another 1-1 this week. However, AXIZ will still have another game to see if they can get their first 2-0 in the LJL 2021 Spring Split. This first game for AXIZ is a great one, and let's start off by actually talking about one of their players that really had an incredible game, and that is their bot lane carry, Honey.
Oh yeah, this guy was a monster. The bot lane 2v2, it was a little bit scary early on, but then they started getting it. They got a couple kills down there with Inno teleporting in at level 6 and turning around some stuff down there, which was good news. And then towards the late game, he was literally untouchable, firing from miles away, jumping in and destroying anybody he turned his gaze on. Turned a little bit into the eye of Sauron there. You didn't want him looking at you, that was for sure.
Well, he was wearing the mercenary skin, so he had like his heat vision going on. Yeah,
we figured it out.
Yeah. We figured it out, boys. We got there.
Yeah, and I think the thing for me is like the plan was always to get Honey ahead. We saw that from like the level 2 bot lane play where like Hoglet just steamrolled through the jungle clear and immediately went bot lane. Really good play from Secret to like deny that play from stunning the Alistar mid combo, but like the plan was very apparent that we want this Tristana ahead.
Let's talk about another member over on the side of AXIZ who had a really amazing game. But if you look at the scoreboard, it doesn't look like that. And for longest time, Megumin in this mid lane had a 1-4, 1-5 kind of KDA. Didn't look good. However, they have been one of the most influential members on the AXIZ team, didn't they, Chimera?
I agree. I mean, I said it midway through the cast. Like the KDA is not flattering. But all of the Empress Divide, a lot of the mid to late game Empress Divides ended up being very, very important. Blocking out like a Kaiserol or disengaging the Aatrox and the Olaf who were Ragnaroking into the fight. So important. And when the Azir died, it was when the Tristana was also trying to free fire and stuff like that. So the cooldowns that were used to kill the Azir often ended up not being used on the Tristana, who then also managed to carry those fights. So honestly, trading your life for the team fight win multiple times works out for AXIZ.
It really did. Let's go over and actually start talking about those team fights initially, because AXIZ were able to capitalize on a lot of them, and they got all of the Drakes because of that.
Yeah, I mean, Jesters looked like they had that game in the early one. They got up to a 3k gold lead. It was looking great. AXIZ couldn't team fight. Megumin was down at 1-4. It was looking a bit rough. The Herald fight early on. It was all looking quite scary. And then basically at a point where the front line was so scary that Secret was struggling to get in. And AXIZ could not land the wombo combo for the life of them. There were a few times when, particularly in the late game, Recap's ult, which early on had looked pretty good, but then they'd been disengaged, suddenly weren't hitting. The one sombrero when Secret lands the 3-man Magnet Storm, missing that ult was so critical. Whereas on the other side, you've got Nazir, you've got a Tristana at level 18 and 5 items. Talk about high uptime DPS characters. It's so much less about the wombo combo for them. And if AXIZ miss that and then can't get onto this Tristana who's just firing from ages away, they lose the extended fights time and time again.
And this has been something that we need to kind of look from the opposite side, Chimera. For all the good that we're talking about AXIZ, how much bad was there from the side of Rascal Jester?
I use a term quite a lot about forced and unforced errors. And when you're counting down against like a Mountain Dragon timer against, such a tanky team outside, of course, the 2 carries they had, it can force your hand. And sometimes forcing your hand is not something which players are particularly adept at doing. Sometimes they're better in the even game states rather than when they're kind of down against the wall. The Recap had some really good early game plays. We saw that Shockwave, the 3-man around Herald. We saw the 4-man around Baron, which didn't end up getting capitalized on. It felt like Recap had so many good ultimates. I wonder but they didn't end up being capitalized on. And I wonder if after that point, he tried to just go that extra step forward and then just ended up overextending and overestimating what he could achieve in a lot of these fights. And that led to the more visibly quite poor Shockwaves.
So do we think, Initialize, that this was a miscommunication? Do we think maybe it's just multiple members of the side of Rascal Jester just not kind of mirroring up when a team fight? They, in theory, had a good composition to fight, at least, against AXIZ, but it just seemed to always be slightly a losing battle.
They did in the early and mid game, and then it hits a point when Azir is at 2-3 items, even if you put him behind in the early game. Then it hits a point where Tristana has so much range and such a big front line that she is so hard to get onto.
True.
And that was becoming increasingly difficult for all that Rel can shred a lot of those resists off of those tanky members, for all that you've got a Kai'Sa who can definitely do a lot of anti-tank damage. If Tristana gets to free fire and it's still an extended fight, Azir Tristana wins out pretty much every time. And especially once some of those clutch turnaround fights, when you cancel the killer instinct with a well-timed Emperor's Divide, when you force the Aatrox and the Olaf who hit 4 men with a shockwave and get a Q3 flash as well on top of them, and then survive because of another Emperor's Divide and the like. That lead, which Rascal Jesters were very, very close to snowballing out of control, never quite got there. It comes back to even. Tristana gets items, so does Azir, and the game just becomes so much harder for Jesters. So, I'll say, nice job, Jesters, early game. Fantastic job from AXIZ for coming back.
Yeah, AXIZ did a well and truly good job. They prevented a lot of the game from falling out of their reach when Rascal Jester did take that early lead, but they pulled it back. We've got a bit of information due to Senju Poro giving us a quick hint and translation of the interview that is happening with AXIZ in on at the moment. And I just want to get a few of your takeaways from what we're getting from them. He's very happy to get the interview, to get the win today. He said his performance in scrims has been a bit low, but Hoglet has always been saying, quote, "You can do it." What do you guys take away from that?
Well, I think
those rookies, man.
I think honestly, NO had such a good game right now. So I think that AXIZ, if it doesn't, you know what? If these scrims are crap and you turn up on stage like this, don't change anything. Keep doing what
You gotta believe in Hoglet. You can do it.
And how many times over the years have we heard about scrim gods never turning up on stage, or people who've been really bad at scrim suddenly turning up and winning everything? Like G2 at Worlds, apparently were losing every scrim, and then they managed to make their way to World semi-finals. TSM 2016 scrim gods didn't look so great then either, unfortunately. And it is always rough, especially when you are a newer top laner and you're in scrims and you just spend your time getting blasted every time you load into a scrim. But he did his job here. He found some great flanks. Yeah, he fell a little way behind against Gnatu, especially after the early teleport around the Drake, but it was enough. And that Renekton in the late game, hell, that Renekton in the mid game when he was finding those flanks was more than good enough in this game.
It was, and to end this out, Renekton first pick was pre-decided by AXIZ, so they had a complete idea on how they wanted to do this draft. Gentlemen, coming in to our next round, we're actually going to be seeing V3 face off against AXIZ, so we can see if AXIZ will be able to do 2-0, or are V3 looking to really keep shrugging and pushing themselves to maybe be one of the top teams in the LJL. We'll find out right after this break.